Hi again. Welcome to week 2. As you know, we're covering this unit in 3 modules. In here, we're now talking about more about the strategy of HRD. But firstly, thank you for introducing yourselves on the discussion board, or the DB, but please add to this if you haven't done so. Throughout the semester, I'll be noting the interconnectedness of the topics by looking back to the previous week and forward to the next topic at the end of the PowerPoint. So we'll try and keep it all linked together that way. So briefly looking back to week 1, I hope you've had a chance to complete the readings and the activities associated with week 1. The good and bad learning activities highlights the usefulness of your own personal experiences in guiding your practice. Gives you insight and opportunities, I guess, to improve your own practice in comparison to your previous good and bad experiences. Okay, so the articles 2 from week 1 introduce you to the important academic themes in HRD. So we've already noted that the scope of HRD is much debated, and your reading will bring you to greater awareness of the alternative definitions and perspectives. HRD is really only a term that's really come to prominence in the 1990s, but the reference is often to training and development. So if you're looking around for literature, sometimes that's where you'll find it. But HRD suggests, a bigger topic than training. And the Peterson article is among the readings for this week that really discusses that particular topic, the difference between training and HRD. Okay, and as we noted last week, HRD can be related to individuals, including yourself, groups, organisations and societies. We looked at 2 particular definitions, and we noted that the definition apply well beyond employers and to other areas, volunteer groups, personal learning and so on. So these are ideas to think about as we go on. So with strategic HRD, we seek to understand the bigger picture within HRD planning and problem solving. Think about organisations that are familiar to you, and whether you think you know their business strategy. You could start by thinking about their ads, their lines on advertising material, and do you know their HRD strategy? So the web these days is a wonderful resource for seeing how organisations set out their strategy and its various components and the salience of HRD. And I suggest that many of you would have had the experience of looking at organisations in that way on the website, perhaps as you're going for thinking about a job there or whatever. So as an example, Griffith Uni has on its website its vision and its mission, and you can take a closer look at that website link there. But you can see that our vision is to be one of the most influential universities in Australia and the Asia Pacific region. So that suggests a context that's certainly well beyond Australia in terms of our reach. So we're committed, you can see in the mission, to innovation, bringing disciplines together. So we have a strong interdisciplinarian background where different people work together. We see the value in that. Internationalisation, we're interested in being open to other countries. We do have a long history of equity and social justice and lifelong learning, and for the enrichment of Queensland, Australia and the international community. So they're, they're big aims, but they're encapsulated there. And then as you think about that, you can see the values, and then you move down to goals. So they're the more measurable outcomes, different aspects, say different research outcomes or different outcomes in terms of our reach, as it says, across Australia. So the OUA programs are one way that we do that, and in fact our OUA programs offer students who may not even be able to get to a university the opportunity for higher education. So it's been a very important initiative, I think, of Griffith. And then you look at the HRD programs within Griffith, and you can see on the website that there are various learning and development programs around mentoring of academics, leadership development courses, and so on and so forth, how to be a team leader, those sorts of things. So you can see the links there back to the original vision and mission and goals. So there's more specific strategies, HRD strategies encapsulated within those programs, but they're interlinked with those higher level strategies. This is as an example from the web actually, but it's since disappeared, so I haven't put the link there, but it's just really to give you a sense of how this particular organisation called the Institute for Training and Research of Southern Sudan had set out its strategic goals, which were around justice, security, secure livelihoods and peace. We'd hope for that, and capacity building. And that was very much about HRD, where participants would learn about justice and rule of law, conflict management and peace building, program planning, leadership, governance, ICT, etc. So again, you've got this cascading approach where you've got some sort of overall goal and a mission, and then various strategic objectives, and they filter down to specific programs. So that's the idea here of strategy. The strategic management process has been documented. This is one example. You can again see that idea of different aspects interlinking. So you've got your strategy formulation at the top there, which is based on an analysis of what happens both outside the organisation and inside the organisation. There's you'll see those key ideas there about mission and goals, and then going down to certain behaviours and evaluating results down the bottom there. Now this is quite good in that whilst the previous slide it was very much linear from the top to the bottom, this shows much more of a cycle, and I think in reality these areas are interlinked. So if you evaluate a certain program, that links back to how well you're implementing your vision and your higher order goals, for example. So that idea of interlinking is important. There's 3 resources that I've put on the activities for this week, so you can please take a look at those. Cantor talks about the importance of going across levels. So she sees very good HRD specialists and HRM specialists as being able to see the bigger picture around strategy, but then being able to zoom in to some really important issues that may need to be solved before we can go forward. So she talks about zoom in and zoom out, and I think that's a really nice way of thinking about the cases that we'll be discussing later in the semester. Another one, Collins and Porras, has an interesting way of setting out what they would say as a vision and a mission and the goals. Again, I put that chapter on the site for this week. It's a really interesting chapter, and it particularly shows how there's that golden thread, you might say, between the strategy and what happens in those specific programs, how it's all linked together. Well, that's the way it should be. We've also got two structured ways of thinking about the bigger picture, which is a SWOT analysis and a PEST analysis. And and you may be familiar with those, but they're really looking at the external environment in particular, and as well as the internal environment. And they give you frameworks for analysis. And I've included those actually in assessment item 3 specifically. When we look at the Harrods case, which is that assessment item. But yeah, so they're good to have a look at right now as well. So, strategic HRD provides a clear signal of the importance of learning and development, hopefully. HRD emphasises the investment in people versus training as a cost. So we would argue that HRD programs, training programs, yes, they have a cost, but they are investing in people and they're investing in the organisation, and they highlight the idea of continuous learning. Also, HRD can really engender loyalty and commitment. So if an organisation is open and prepared and wanting to have learning within its organisation, it can make a person feel more valued in that organisation and better equipped for the job, more competent. So if you feel competent, that increases your positive regard for yourself and the organisation. HRD can interrelate with other HRM policies around recruitment, retaining and rewarding talented employees, and improving organisational functioning and reputation. So, for example, as you recruit new people, it's most important that they receive a really good orientation to the organisation. So, as you're recruiting, the sorts of things that these people may need in the organisation. And by learning, an organisational strategy itself can be transformed by members of the organisation. So again, this gets to this idea of interrelatedness. So not just setting a strategy and saying, oh, okay, off we go for 10 years, but a strategy that influences the programs and the ways forward, but is also where people have enough confidence in themselves to be able to also give input into the strategy, so that it's can be organic to a certain extent, especially if people are really informed in the organisation. So a key debate within HRD is that on one hand you've got HRD strategy is impossible without corporate and business strategy, which is the conventional view, and versus that HRD can contribute in a proactive way to organisational processes and outcomes. So is the purpose of strategic HRD to serve a business strategy or to support it, or how do they link together? So we'd hope that HRD can take that more proactive role in the development of strategy. So strategic HRD is a multi-level concept, and its contribution is to enhance organisational effectiveness and performance in the longer term. It can have a major influence on shaping organisational culture. For example, putting learning at the centre of an organisation makes it a really positive culture. HRD can develop current and future leaders, build commitment, and help manage change, and also anticipate change. What learning will be needed. A really simple example of that is if you're changing technology, well, it's important that a training program be rolled out as well. Policy, HRD policy is more about the framework or set of principles that govern decisions and actions about programs and activities. So just, what is actually written down in policy, what's guiding that? And again, that's influenced, of course, by external aspects such as government regulations, the economy, and internal aspects such as the values, how budgets are allocated, that sort of thing. So the policy is really is a very tangible thing, a set of ideas written down. HRD strategies and plan are the strategies intended. It's talking about the long term rather than the short term. It's on significant central areas of performance, and it's organisational rather than the individual level. So it's about intentions and how these are articulated through plans, which is necessary to justify budgets, and the text talks about that on page 29. HRD plans are concerned with shorter term horizons, often a year. What will we achieve in a year in terms of specific programs and activities? They'll be more operational or functional and ensure that the day-to-day work of the organisation can continue. Change is not always seen as a HRD issue, but it most certainly is, because if you think about learning, there's always change involved in that. The more, as you learn new things, you change as a person, and if you want your organisation to move forward, then there has to be learning and change. However, some change is quite incremental. Might be learning more about using a computer system, for example, whereas transformational change will be more like changing a whole organisational culture. So that idea of change is always there in the background when we talk about HRD. How the HRD function and HRD professionals work is important. You can pick this up in the organisations that you work in and read about, and in the cases we present here. So some organisations will outsource, say, the more functional areas. So an actual training program where people, where the rubber hits the road, might be called a functional area, and so specialists are brought in for that. External consultants, for example, but they might retain the more strategic areas, so the actual long-term planning is very much in-house. But of course, the in-house people have to know what's going on if they're bringing in other people from outside, that it's all staying in sync and that it's appropriate and evaluated and links back to the strategic area. So also within HRD itself, sometimes we think about it at the more functional end, and the other end as a strategic partner. This is on a continuum, and that's on the next slide. So if you look at one end, you can see that HRD would be seen as a strategic business partner in the organisation, and at the other end, just as important, is activity-based HRD training programs, transactional kind of learning about central skills that people need in an organisation. So that's, I would say that they're both important, but we certainly, at the strategic end, we need to consider change and long-term relationships. At the instructional end, we need to think about, well, there might be some short-term skills that we need to implement quickly. This is a model from your textbook about the business partner model, just saying how HR is considered, can be considered very central to an organisation. In terms of positioning and management, these are interesting, these different ways of conceptualising, but where this is saying that HRD influence can be high and expertise can be high when there is a learning organisation with a strategic direction and demonstrable and valued results and relevant activities that are evaluated. So in other words, where the strategy and the more functional aspects can be linked together in a really effective way. The other, where we have high influence but not very good expertise, of course that's no good. And likewise, where the expertise might be high but the influence is low. So in other words, what we're looking for is high influence and high expertise. In terms of the HR professional role, where does the HRD practitioner sit? If you work as a HRD professional or you've worked with them, it's important to have a think about this, and I'm sure you have. Are you a strategic partner working with line managers to align HR plans and business plans, or are you more of an administrative expert where you're re-engineering HR and the way things work to make it efficient? Are you a champion of the employee, making sure that they are being listened to and responded to? Are you a change agent where you're really looking at that bigger picture of change? So it's been argued that these four roles combined allow the HR function to be a true business partner, but it could also be argued that that's really difficult to hold all those roles as well. And some writers in the area, some academics argue that there are certain parts of that role that can easily slip away, like an employee champion, for example. So HRD practitioners can operate as a business partner to align HRD and business strategy. The HRD role can and should be managing key dilemmas related to change and expertise and influence, and whether HRD in fact is centralised or decentralised. So that's that idea of structure. Where is the HRD? Where are they actually situated? How do they relate to other parts of the organisation? And some future and current challenges relate to perhaps a mobile workforce, with people working from home and having, in some ways, a more flexible option. How can HRD contribute to that quest for work-life balance? And even if we outsource our HRD activities, we still need to be expert in this area so that we can oversee the quality. Okay, so summing up, there's conventional views on strategy where top managers set out the vision and the mission, develop the goals, the strategy, and then they see HRD as just fitting into that and working out the best way to contribute. An alternative view is that HRD plays a key role in a positive long-term survival through, for example, developing current and future leaders, building commitment and skills, ensuring proactive responses to changing external and internal environments. And really that's with the Harrods case that we do at the end for the final piece of assessment. These are some of the ideas that I would like you to be thinking through. Please also have a read of this article by Mackenzie et al., who actually say that they believe that HRD as a profession could have done a lot more to prevent the GFC, which is a really important thought, I think, at this moment. So HRD strategy, in essence, is intended to have long-term impact versus short-term, significant versus marginal areas of performance, and it really is about the organisational level. So we've considered HRD as a strategy. The influence of HRD is quite a hot topic. The RE organisation, Australian Human Resource Institute, often talks about needing and having a seat at the table of top management. There's a number of books and resources that allow you to really think about these ideas, and the role of HRD professional is not always straightforward. So in week 3 we're going to be looking at some skills and abilities for individuals groups and organisations. So looking ahead, as I've mentioned, we include strategy here as an overarching framework. It's important to think about in every case that we consider, and we'll specifically be doing that in the Harrods case in the final assessment item. So please read as many cases as you can, like the McDonald's and Westinghouse cases in Chapter 2, and also think about the HRD professional role from your own perspective. Thank you.